The restaurant was closing. I'd been a waitress at Rossini's for 8 months, long enough to know that Thursday nights meant either quiet, elegance, or something darker. Tonight, the air tasted like something. The dinner service had ended at 11. I was clearing the private dining room on the 3rd floor, the one with the mahogany panels and the chandelier that cost more than my rent, when I heard the voices. The French doors were cracked open just enough. I shouldn't have noticed. I absolutely should have walked away. But I was 24, restless, and the conversation threading through the gap was magnetic in a way I couldn't explain. "The Volkov situation is getting complicated," a man said. His voice was rough, older. "They're moving into our territory in the North End." I froze. My hand stilled on a wine glass. Let them try. That voice smooth, controlled, dangerous, in a way that made my spine straighten. "Luca doesn't respond to pressure. You know that, Dominic." Luca, the owner. The man who rarely smiled and whose eyes tracked you across a room like he was reading something no one else could see. I'd spoken to him exactly 4 times. Each time, he'd looked at me like I was a puzzle he'd already solved. "But the commission wants—" "I don't care what the commission wants. Tell them Volkov bleeds if they step 1 foot past 4th Avenue. Tell them it comes from me directly." The conversation continued. Something about a shipment, something about a woman, no, a widow, who'd talked to the feds. I should have moved. Instead, I stood there, holding a wine glass, listening to men casually discuss violence like it was logistics. When I finally forced myself to leave, my hands were shaking. I didn't go back to that floor for 3 days. But on Sunday, I was cut for the evening service early. Maria, the head server, asked me to take over the private room again. Someone had called in sick. I wanted to refuse. Something in my chest tightened at the thought of going back up there. I went anyway. The dinner that night was smaller. Just 3 men. Luca sat at the head of the table in a charcoal suit, his dark hair slicked back, his face carved from marble. To his right was the older man from before Dominic, who had sunken cheeks and expensive cufflinks. To his left was someone younger, nervous, with a thin scar along his jawline. I delivered the first course with mechanical precision. Pappardelle with wild boar. Luca's eyes lifted as I set down his plate, held mine for just long enough that I felt it everywhere. "Thank you, Sophie," he said quietly. His accent was Italian, or something close, carefully flattened, but not entirely gone. My name. He'd never used my name before. I left. I returned 20 minutes later for the next course. This time, I wasn't alone. The second server, Tony, was supposed to help clear plates and deliver the main, but Tony got held up downstairs, and Lucas seated so that he could see the entire room, the doorways. Everything didn't move to stop me when I approached alone. "Gentlemen," I began clearing the appetizer plates. The scar-faced man was talking, animated, angry. Told her to keep her mouth shut, but she's already said. He stopped. Saw me. Dominic's hand went to his water glass. The temperature in the room shifted like a door had swung open in winter. "It's fine," Luca said, his voice unmoved. "Sophie, what's your take on the Barone situation?" My hands stopped. I was holding 2 plates. The question made no sense. Waiters didn't have takes. We existed in the margins. We cleared plates and refilled glasses, and tried not to be noticed. He was testing me. I realized this even as terror moved through my chest like fingers. I should have played dumb. Should have laughed nervously and excused myself. Instead, I heard my own voice, small, confused, honest. "Isn't her name Lucia?" The silence was absolute. Luca turned to face me fully. Dominic's face went white. The scar-faced man's hand reached toward his jacket. I took a breath, realized what I'd just done, what I'd just admitted. I'd overheard, remembered, connected dots I had no business connecting. "I think I misheard something. I'm sorry. Out," Luca said, not to me. The word was soft, but every man at the table moved like it was a gunshot. They stood. They didn't question. Dominic actually knocked his water glass over in his hurry to the door. The scar-faced man was already gone. Within 15 seconds, I was alone with Luca in the private dining room, my hands still holding their plates, my heart hammering hard enough to break bones. He remained seated. One hand lay on the table, relaxed. The other was out of sight. "Close the door," he said. I did. The click of the latch sounded like a bullet chambering. "Who told you about Lucia Barone?" His voice was polite. That was the worst part. It was like he was asking what I wanted for dessert. "No one," I whispered. "I heard when I was clearing the room a few days ago. The doors were open, and I heard. I couldn't finish. The lie was impossible. I wasn't trying to listen. I remember things. I have a good memory." "How good?" I didn't answer. He already knew. He'd known the moment I opened my mouth. He stood slowly, deliberately. The fabric of his suit caught the light as he moved toward me. I stepped backward. My hip hit the table. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. "The owner of the restaurant," I said. It was the coward's answer, the one he'd let me escape with. "No." He stopped. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the slight shadow of stubble along his jaw. "I'm someone you should never have overheard. Someone who doesn't let people walk away after they do." My legs felt disconnected from my body. "What are you going to do?" I asked. He was quiet for so long that I thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was lower, and there was something underneath it, something that tasted like possession. "I'm going to take care of this," he said. "And you, Sophie, are going to stop being a waitress at Rossini's." I didn't go back to the restaurant. Not because Luca fired me, he didn't. He had Dominic come to my apartment the next morning with an envelope of cash and 3 words. "Don't come in." I spent 2 days in my studio apartment in the North End, staring at the envelope, $5,000, enough for 2 months' rent, and trying to calculate whether I was alive by accident or by design. The news didn't help. There was nothing in the papers about Lucia Barone, nothing on the local news. Whatever she was to Luca, to the men at that table, she existed in the spaces between public information. In the shadow world, on the 3rd day, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello?" My voice came out small. "It's Dominic Caruso." Not a question, a statement of fact. "Don't hang up." I didn't. "Luca wants to know if you've left the city." My mouth went dry. "No, you're going to stay that way. You're not going to leave your apartment without permission. You're not going to tell anyone what you heard, what you know, anything. You understand?" "Yes." "Say it." "I understand." He hung up. The cage didn't have bars, but I could feel them. Over the next week, I realized the shape of what had happened. I'd become a liability, and liabilities in Luca's world had 2 options: elimination or containment. He'd chosen the second, which meant I was being watched. Not constantly, not obviously, but regularly. I'd see the same dark sedan on my street, the same man, always different man, but same presence at the corner cafe. They were protecting me, I realized slowly. But more than that, they were holding me. On the 8th day, the phone rang again. "Put on something nice," Dominic's voice said. No greeting. "There's a car outside." "Where am I going?" "Out." The car was black, pristine, expensive. The driver didn't speak. He took me to a restaurant I'd never heard of, smaller than Rossini's, with a red awning and outdoor seating even though it was October. The driver opened my door and gestured to the entrance. Inside, I found Luca at a corner table, a glass of red wine in front of him. He was wearing dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that made him look less like a restaurant owner and more like something dangerous dressed in casual clothes. "Sit," he said. I sat across from him, my purse clutched in my lap like it might save me. "You look terrified," he observed. There was no cruelty in it. Just noting. "That's good. It means you understand the situation." "What situation is that exactly?" His eyes held mine. "The one where you heard something you shouldn't have, and now I have to decide what you're worth to keep alive." The honesty was almost worse than a threat. At least threats left room for negotiation. This was just math. "Why am I here?" I asked. "Because I'm curious." He took a sip of wine. "Most people in your situation either lie very well or fall apart completely. You did neither. You told the truth even though it terrified you." "I should have lied." "Yes, you should have." He set down the glass. "Why didn't you?" I thought about it. Thought about the fear, the calculation, The moment where I'd realized that lying would only delay whatever came next. Because you would have known I was lying. And that would be worse. Something moved in his expression. Not quite a smile, but the suggestion of one. Smart girl. The words made my skin hot. A waiter approached. Luca ordered for both of us without asking what I wanted. Branzino, roasted vegetables, a white wine that tasted like honey and minerals. We ate in silence for several minutes, and the silence felt like its own language, dangerous, intimate, charged with something I didn't have a name for yet. How old are you? He asked. 24. Where are you from? Vermont. I came to the city for college, stayed after. My family's all still up there. Have you called them? No. You told me not to leave my apartment without permission. I thought that included... It doesn't. He cut me off. You can make phone calls, but you won't tell them anything. You understand? Why would I tell them anything? Because people talk. Because you're frightened and lonely, and you might think that if they knew where you were, who you were with, they could protect you. They can't. His voice was quiet, factual, absolutely final. Your protection comes from me. Only from me. If you betray that, your family becomes a vulnerability. Do you understand what that means? I did. Perfectly. Clearly. The door he was opening gave me a view into the machinery underneath. The casual way violence became a tool. A language. A logic that governed everything. I won't tell them. I whispered. Good. He finished his wine. You're going to move. My chest tightened. Move where? I have an apartment. Upper East Side. You'll move there tomorrow. Dominic will send someone to pack your things. You'll tell the landlord you're breaking your lease early. I'll cover the penalty. I don't understand. Why would I? Because your current apartment is in Volkov territory, and I don't control that. If I want to keep you safe, you need to be somewhere I can see you. Somewhere I can protect you. Forced protection against her will. I understood then, with a clarity that felt like drowning. This wasn't about whether I was a threat to him. This was about him deciding that I belonged to his world now, in whatever capacity made the most sense. And if I say no? I asked, already knowing the answer. He looked at me with something close to pity. Then you understand nothing about your situation, and I'd have to make a different decision about what you're worth. The meal continued. He told me about the apartment, 3 bedrooms, a kitchen overlooking Central Park, a doorman, security. He told me about the rules. I didn't leave without informing Dominic. I didn't see anyone without his approval. I didn't work. I didn't have friends over. I existed in the space he'd created for me, soft and controlled and utterly dependent. And as he spoke, describing the cage in such gentle terms, I felt something dangerous move through me. Not quite attraction. Not quite fear. Something that existed in the terrible space between both. When he walked me to the car that night, his hand found the small of my back. Just for a moment, just enough to make me feel the weight of him, the presence, the absolute certainty that he'd already made his decision about my future and was simply waiting for me to catch up. Tomorrow, he said. Dominic will send a car at noon. I nodded, not trusting my voice. As the car pulled away into the October night, I realized I'd never asked him his full name. Never asked what Lucia Baroni was to him. Never asked anything that mattered because part of me, the part that was being reshaped by fear and something darker, something that felt like inevitability, already knew that the answers didn't matter anymore. I was going to move into his apartment. I was going to follow his rules. And I was going to stay. The apartment was beautiful in a way that made my chest hurt. Floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over Central Park. Dark hardwood floors. Minimalist furniture in shades of gray and charcoal. A kitchen that had never been cooked in. Because of course it hadn't, this was a stage, not a home. Dominic walked me through it on a gray Tuesday morning. He was wearing an expensive suit, and an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Your room is the master suite, he said, gesturing down the main hallway. The office is locked, don't try it. The kitchen is yours. We'll have groceries delivered. There's a security system. Don't touch it. Any questions? Who watches the cameras? I asked. He paused, almost smiled. Everyone and no one. Luca monitors them remotely, but his men check in twice a day. They're here for your protection, for surveillance. Same thing. When will I see him? When he wants to be seen, Dominic said flatly. Don't call. Don't contact him. He'll contact you. Then he left, and I was alone in an apartment that didn't belong to me, in a neighborhood where I didn't know a soul, with no job, no purpose, and no autonomy. It should have been suffocating. Somehow, it wasn't. I spent the first 3 days exploring. The master bedroom had its own bathroom with a soaking tub and a rainfall shower. The closet was empty, except for a single silk robe in black. The kitchen had everything copper pots, a sub-zero refrigerator, wine glasses that looked like they cost more than my car. On the 4th day, I found the library. It was through a door I hadn't noticed on the first pass, dark oak, camouflaged against the wall. Inside were floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a leather wingback chair positioned near a window that faced the park. The books were worn, much read, philosophy, history, some thriller novels, a collection of Italian poetry, with passages underlined and notes in the margins. I was running my fingers along the spines when I found it. A photo tucked behind the books. A younger Luca, maybe 20, maybe less, standing next to a woman with the same dark eyes and carved cheekbones. She had her hand on his shoulder. They were standing in front of a chapel with white roses twisted along the stone. Her wedding day, maybe. Or his sister's. I was staring so hard at the photograph that I didn't hear him come in. That's my sister, Lucia. I jumped hard enough to drop the photo. Luca caught it before it hit the ground. He was wearing a black dress shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, and his expression was neutral in the way that meant he was feeling something very deeply. She's beautiful, I said, my voice small. She was. He tucked the photo back into place. Before she made the mistake of falling in love with the wrong man. Before she talked to the wrong people about it. I understood, with a sickness that turned my stomach, what he'd meant that night in the restaurant. The woman who'd talked to the feds. The widow. Is she... I couldn't finish. Dead? His voice was absolutely even. Yes. 3 weeks ago. A car accident in Brooklyn. Very tragic. Very preventable. The way he said it made it clear that it hadn't been an accident at all. I'm so sorry, I whispered. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he moved away, to the window, where the November light made his face look hollowed out, carved from something harder than flesh. You're the first person to express sympathy about that, he said quietly. The first person in my world who wouldn't, in that moment, be calculating what it meant for territory, alliances, power. I realized I was holding my breath. She was studying law, he continued, his voice distant. Wanted to be a prosecutor. She told me once that she wanted to put men like me in prison. I told her that was impossible. Men like me never end up in prison. We end up in graves. She said maybe that was the same thing. He turned back to me. She was the soft one, the one who wasn't supposed to be in this world at all. And she died because she loved someone weaker than her, someone who couldn't protect her from my enemies. She died because of your enemies, I said carefully, not because of her. Something flickered in his expression. You're defending me. I'm stating a fact. It's the same thing. He moved closer, and I could smell his cologne, expensive, masculine, something like cedar and smoke. That's your first mistake, Sophie. Finding reasons to defend men like me. Are you a man like you? I asked. Or are you something else? His laugh was harsh, real. That's the question, isn't it? He reached out, and his hand found my chin, tilted it up so he could see my face in the winter light. His thumb brushed my cheekbone. I kill people who cross me. I use fear as currency. I took you from your life and locked you in this apartment like a beautiful, terrified bird. And yet you're asking me if I'm a man like myself. If maybe I'm something better. Maybe you are, I whispered. I'm not. His hand dropped. I'm exactly what I appear to be. The kindest thing I can do for you is remind you of that. Repeatedly. Until you stop making excuses. But he didn't leave. Instead, he moved to the wingback chair and sat. And he gestured for me to sit in the other chair across from him. I did, my heart racing. Tell me about yourself, he said. Everything. Don't leave anything out. So I did. I told him about growing up in Vermont, about my parents who owned a bookstore, about my younger brother who wanted to be a mechanic. I told him about college in Boston, about the roommate who became my best friend, about moving to the city because I wanted something dangerous and different and alive. And instead you got me, he said. And instead I got you. I agreed. Do you resent that? I thought about it. Thought about the cage of rules and surveillance and the terrible, gorgeous apartment. Thought about the way he looked at me like I was a problem he was still solving. Thought about the photograph of his sister, the woman he'd killed for, the woman he'd failed to save. No, I said. I don't think I do. Good. He stood. There's an event tomorrow night, a fundraiser for a children's hospital. I'm hosting it. You're going to attend. As what? As yourself. As someone I've taken an interest in. Wear something beautiful. There's a credit card on the kitchen counter. No limit. Don't embarrass me. I won't know anyone there. You'll know me. He moved toward the door, paused. And you'll stay very close to me. Do you understand? Yes, I said. Good girl. He left, and I was alone again, but something had changed. He'd shown me Lucia. He'd shown me the soft part of himself, the brother, the man who loved someone he couldn't save. And in showing me his wound, he'd given me something to hold on to. A reason to not see him as a monster. Which was, I realized, exactly what he'd intended. The fundraiser was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, in a private wing that had been transformed into a garden of white roses and gold. The women wore jewelry that looked like ransom demands. The men wore power like cologne. And I wore a black gown that made me look like I belonged in a museum myself, untouchable, expensive, utterly out of place. Luca's hand never left the small of my back, not once during the entire evening. He guided me through conversations with men in expensive suits, women who looked at me with curious eyes, donors and politicians and people whose faces I recognized from the pages of society magazines. He introduced me as a friend and let the ambiguity hang in the air like perfume. What I realized, slowly, was that bringing me was a message. To whom, I wasn't sure. But the message was there crystal clear, written in the language of possession and public declaration. We were leaving when it happened. A man in the coat check line, slicked back hair, expensive watch, the kind of presence that came from old money and older connections, nodded at Luca. Friendly, almost familiar. Carmine, he said. Heard about Lucia. My condolences. Luca's entire body went still. The hand on my back felt like it belonged to a statue. His voice, when he spoke, was so quiet I almost couldn't hear it. Thank you, Volkov. Volkov, the name from that overheard conversation. The threat from the north. The man whose territory Luca was protecting me from. Volkov's eyes slid to me, assessed, calculated. Beautiful girl, he said. You know, it's dangerous to bring something precious into a room full of thieves. People might think you're not as good at protecting what matters. The silence that followed tasted like electricity. Go to the car, Luca said to me, his voice completely flat. But, now, Sophie. I went. But not before I saw Luca's hand move to his jacket. Not before I heard the edge of violence in his breathing. The car was waiting, the same black sedan that had picked me up all those weeks ago. I sat in the back, my heart hammering, and watched the entrance to the museum until Luca emerged 10 minutes later. He didn't speak on the drive back to the apartment. He didn't speak when we arrived. He simply took my hand and led me upstairs, and when we reached the bedroom, he finally looked at me. Did you tell anyone about that conversation? He asked. His eyes were dark in a way that suggested the answer mattered more than my life. About Lucia? About the Volkovs? Anything? No, I told you I wouldn't. Swear it. I swear. He pulled me against him, and the embrace was desperate in a way his controlled facade usually prevented. His hand came up to the back of my head, held me against his chest, and I could feel the thunder of his heartbeat. Volkov is testing me, he said quietly. He's testing whether I'm strong enough to keep what I claim, whether I can protect you, whether you're a weakness or an investment. Which am I asked into his chest. He was quiet for a long time. I don't know yet. That's what terrifies me. The next 2 weeks were different. Security increased. The same men who'd been casual in their surveillance became visible, obvious, present. I saw them in the lobby, on the street below the apartment, in the building across the way with binoculars and vigilance. Luca was gone more often, and when he came back, He had the smell of gunpowder on him sometimes, or blood that he washed away in the master bathroom. He didn't explain. I didn't ask. But his need for me became fiercer. He'd find me in the library and pull me into his lap, hold me without speaking, his hands shaking slightly. Or he'd call me into his office, the one I'd been forbidden from entering, and just have me sit near him while he made phone calls that I couldn't quite understand. Is this because of Volkov? I asked him one night as we lay in the dark of the bedroom. We hadn't slept together, not physically, but we'd begun falling asleep in the same bed, him on top of the covers, me beneath them, separated by a barrier that felt thinner every night. Volkov is a symptom, Luca said. His voice was rough. The disease is older than that. There are 5 families in this city. My family is the strongest, but we're not untouchable. Wars happen. Territory shifts. And if you're perceived as weak, if you're perceived as sentimental, or distracted, or too focused on one person, then suddenly you're not strong anymore. So I'm a liability. You're a complication. He turned his head to look at me in the darkness. You're something I wanted without calculating what you'd cost. And in my world, that kind of miscalculation gets people killed. I should have been afraid. Instead, I felt a strange kind of calm. Then what are you going to do? I'm going to make sure that anyone who looks at you sees something too valuable to touch. I'm going to make it clear that taking you would cost more than they'd gain. I'm going to make you. He stopped. What? Mine. Irrevocably. Publicly. Permanently. The word hung between us like a confession. How? I whispered. I don't know yet. But I will. Trust me. And the terrible thing was, I did. On December 1st, Luca asked me to have dinner with him in the apartment, not a meal delivered from outside, dinner that he prepared, with his own hands, in the kitchen I'd never seen him use. Chicken piccata, pasta with white wine and garlic, salad, fresh bread from a bakery he'd apparently sent someone to retrieve that afternoon, a bottle of wine that cost more than I'd made in a month at Rossini's. He cooked with the same precision he seemed to apply to everything, each movement intentional, economical, controlled. I sat at the kitchen counter and watched, and something about the domesticity of it broke something open in my chest. My mother taught me, he said, not looking up from the lemon he was slicing. She was from Sicily. She said a man who can't feed himself can't protect anyone else. She said the kitchen is where you learn patience, how to balance flavors, how to know when something is ruined beyond saving. What happened to her? She died. When I was 17, a heart attack. Very sudden, very preventable if she'd seen a doctor instead of being stubborn. He slid the chicken into a pan, and the sizzle filled the space between us. After that, I took over the family business. I was young, angry, desperate to prove I could be ruthless. I was. But I forgot the rest of what she taught me. The patience, the balance, the understanding that some things, he looked at me, can't be salvaged once they're broken. We ate at the dining table with the city lights spreading out below us. He asked me questions about myself, not surface questions, but real ones. What did I want from my life? What had I given up by coming to the city? Did I ever regret it? Before you, I would have said yes, I told him. I would have said I wasted 2 years working as a waitress with no plan. But now, I trailed off, uncertain how to finish. But now? He prompted. Now I don't know if I regret anything. Because nothing would be different. I would still be here, still be with you. He set down his fork. In the candlelight, his face looked carved from something ancient and dangerous. That's a very soft answer, Sophie. Almost like surrender. Maybe it is, I said quietly. He reached across the table and took my hand. Just held it, his thumb running along my palm. I need to tell you something, he said. Something that matters. And I need you to listen without interrupting, because if you interrupt, I won't be able to finish. I nodded. I kill people, he said simply. It's not metaphorical. It's not something I regret or something I'm trying to stop doing. It's what I do, and it's what I'll continue doing as long as I'm alive. I've killed people for business. I've killed people for territory. I've killed people because they looked at me wrong, and I've killed people because I wanted to. My hand wanted to pull away. I didn't let it. When my sister died, I killed 17 people. Some of them had actually had anything to do with her death. Others were just connected. The driver who worked for the Volkovs, the man who sold the information, the woman who overheard the information being sold and didn't report it. I worked backward through the chain and ended everyone in it. 37 shots fired, 12 people dead, and I was still not satisfied because the real enemy Volkov himself was still breathing. He was still holding my hand, still looking at me. I'm telling you this because you need to understand what you're attached to, not the surface version, not the man who reads poetry and cooks for you. The thing underneath, the capacity for violence that's so fundamental to me that I can't imagine being without it. If you can't accept that, you need to tell me now, and I'll make arrangements for you. I thought about Lucia, about the funeral I imagined but never saw, about the cascade of death that had rippled out from her murder. I accept it, I said. His hand tightened on mine. You don't understand what you're accepting. Maybe I don't, but I'm accepting it anyway. He released me and finished his meal in silence. When we stood to clear the plates, his hand found my waist, and he pulled me against him, my back to his chest. His mouth was near my ear. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, he said quietly, or the most foolish, and I can't decide which one I want you to be. That night, he came to bed, not to sleep on top of the covers anymore, but under them. He was careful didn't touch me in ways that crossed lines, but his presence felt like a boundary crossing all its own. I could feel the heat of him, the weight of him in the mattress, the slow exhale of his breathing in the darkness. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For not running. For staying. For letting me be less alone. I turned to face him in the dark. I could barely see his outline, but I could feel his eyes on me. I didn't think I had a choice, I said. You didn't. That was the point. His hand found my face, traced my cheekbone with a tenderness that felt like apology. But somewhere in the last weeks, it became a choice you could have made, and you didn't make it. That matters to me more than you understand. His hand slid down to my neck, and he pulled me closer until my forehead rested against his. We stayed like that for a long time, not kissing, not moving, just breathing the same air. It felt more intimate than anything physical could have been. What are we doing? I asked him finally. Being dangerous together, he said. Being everything we shouldn't be. Being inevitable. December deepened. The city transformed into something crystalline and hostile. Snow fell on the expensive streets. Holiday decorations appeared in windows like a joke. Luca became different during that time. More present, more drawn to me. He'd find excuses to touch me, a hand on my back, fingers brushing my arm, pulling me against him in the darkness of the bedroom, where we still maintained our careful distance. On December 23rd, he came home carrying a small box wrapped in silver paper. What is this? I asked. A gift. For Christmas. For every Christmas you'll spend with me. But you can open it now. Inside the box was a key. Not decorative, not symbolic. Real. Practical. For the apartment? I asked, confused. For the building, for the garage, for every place that matters. You have access now. You're not confined anymore. You can leave whenever you want. I looked at him. This is a test. Yes. And what happens when I fail it? When I use the key to leave? Then I'll know I was right to be afraid of what you'd become to me. And if I don't leave? He took the key back from my trembling hand and slipped it into my pocket himself, his fingers lingering against my hip. Then we stop pretending this is a cage and accept that it's a choice. That night, I could have left. I could have taken the key, walked out, disappeared into the city with the cash I'd slowly been gathering from the credit card he'd given me. No one would have stopped me. The security was there to protect me, not contain me. I understood that now. I didn't leave. Instead, I went to his office. He was there, as I'd known he would be, looking over documents with Dominic, who took one look at me and excused himself with a muttered comment about discretion. I want to stay, I said without preamble. Not because I have to, because I want to. Luca set down the papers. His expression was carefully neutral. That's a lie. Maybe, but I want it to be true. He stood, moved around the desk, took my face in his hands. His eyes searched mine like he was trying to find something specific. some evidence of calculation or survival instinct. "I love you," he said finally. "That's what this is. I love you in a way that shouldn't exist between people like us. And loving you makes me vulnerable in ways I've spent my entire life avoiding." My heart stopped. "I don't expect you to say it back. I don't expect you to feel it. I just need you to understand what you've become to me. The most dangerous thing in my life isn't the Volkovs or the Commission or the feds. It's you. It's the understanding that if something happened to you, I would burn the entire city to the ground." I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe properly. He kissed me then. Not gentle, not careful. With the full weight of everything he'd just admitted. His hands came up to cup my face, and his mouth tasted like the wine he'd been drinking. Like desperation. Like loss. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. "Don't make me regret this," he whispered. "I won't," I said, and I meant it with a certainty that terrified me. Christmas passed in the apartment, just the two of us. He gave me a necklace, a thin gold chain with a small key pendant. "So you remember," he said. I gave him a book. A first edition of Italian poetry, inscribed by the author. It had cost almost everything in my savings. He held it like it was made of spun glass. On New Year's Eve, we stood on the balcony overlooking Central Park, and the city erupted below us. "In the new year," he said, his arm around my waist, "we're going to announce this. Officially. I'm going to introduce you to my family, my associates, everyone who matters. And I'm going to make it clear that you belong to me. What if they object? Then I don't care. They'll adapt. What about Volkov?" His jaw tightened. "Volkov is becoming a problem. What does that mean?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled me closer, and I could feel the tension in his body, the controlled rage underneath. "It means," he said finally, "that January is going to be very dangerous. And I need you to be very careful." "Will you be careful?" I asked. He smiled, and it was the first time I'd seen him smile without calculation, without edges. Just something soft, just for me. "No," he said, "but I'm very good at being dangerous. Careful is for people who aren't." It happened on January 7th, a Tuesday, during a snowstorm that turned the city white. He came home with blood on his hands. Not a lot, just a thin line across his knuckles, but enough to make my breath catch when he walked through the door. I said nothing. He said nothing. He went to the bathroom and washed it away, and when he emerged, he was clean, and the moment had passed into something unspoken. We ate dinner like normal. He told me about a gallery opening he'd attended. I told him about the books I'd been reading, the mundane details of a life we were building. After dinner, he took my hand and led me to the bedroom. The snow was falling heavily outside, blanketing the park below in white. The city lights reflected off it, made everything luminous and dangerous. "I need to know," he said quietly, "that you're sure about this. About us. Because once I touch you, once we cross that line, there's no going back. There's no version of this story where you're innocent anymore." I understood what he was asking. Not whether I wanted him physically, he could read that on my body, in the way my heart raced around him. He was asking whether I was willing to become complicit, whether I was willing to accept the weight of being his. "I'm sure," I said. He kissed me slowly. Different from before, not desperate, but thorough. His hands moved down my arms, over my waist, and I felt myself trembling. "Tell me if you want to stop," he said. "Tell me." And we stop. Immediately. Completely. No judgment. "I don't want to stop," I whispered. He undressed me with a patience that felt like punishment and worship combined. Every piece of clothing that fell away felt like a barrier dissolving. When I was bare in front of him, his eyes traced every inch of me, like he was committing it to memory. "You're beautiful," he said, not like a compliment, like a statement of fact about the world. He removed his own clothes, and I saw him fully for the first time. Scars marked his body, some old, some fresh, a map of violence written in his skin. I reached out, and he let me trace them, let me feel the reality of what he was. When he came to me, it was slow. He moved inside me with a restraint that felt like it cost him something, and I tried to relax, tried to accept him, but my body resisted with a tension he seemed to understand. "Look at me," he said, his voice low. Just look at me." I did, and something shifted. The fear didn't disappear, but it transformed into something else. Trust. Surrender. The understanding that he would hurt me, eventually, but not like this. Not now. He moved with deliberation, watching my face, reading every reaction. When I gasped, he slowed further. When I pulled him closer, he obliged. The room filled with the sound of our breathing, the soft sounds of movement, the snow accumulating outside while we became something new inside. I didn't cry out, didn't beg, didn't speak at all. Instead, I felt something inside me break open, not in pain, but in release, like I'd been holding my breath for weeks, and finally exhaled. When it ended, he held me against him, his face buried in my hair, and his hands shook slightly as they moved along my back. "Ti amo," he whispered in Italian. "Ti amo, Sophie. Forgive me for everything I am." I didn't respond with words. I couldn't. Instead, I held him tighter, and I let him feel the answer in the way my body relaxed into his, the way I chose to stay even though I understood, finally, that I had become irrevocably his. The next morning, everything changed. Dominic called. His voice was different, sharp, urgent, wrong. "There's been a situation," he said. "Luca needs you to stay inside. Don't open the doors for anyone except me or my men. Do you understand?" "What happened?" I asked. But Luca was already moving, was already on the phone with men whose names I didn't know, giving orders in a voice I'd never heard before, not the controlled, patient man I'd been sleeping next to, but something harder, something lethal. He looked at me, and the tenderness from the night before was gone. What remained was absolute focus. "The Volkovs made a move," he said without preamble. "They hit one of my warehouses, killed 3 of my men, left a message." "What message?" "That you're mine, and they want to prove I can't keep what's mine." My stomach dropped. "What are you going to do?" He was already pulling on clothes, already moving toward the door. "What I should have done when he looked at you at the museum. I'm going to remind him what it costs to threaten me." The next 72 hours existed outside of time. Luca didn't come home. I received messages through Dominic brief, reassuring, not reassuring at all. He was safe. He was handling it. I should stay inside. Don't watch the news. Don't leave the apartment. I watched the news anyway. There was a shooting in Red Hook. 3 dead, no motive established. An explosion at a construction site in the Bronx. A car crash on the FDR driver, found with a bullet wound. The news kept cycling through the incidents without connecting them, without understanding that these were all chess moves in a game being played for me. On the 3rd evening, he came home. His left shoulder was wrapped in bandages underneath his shirt. His knuckles were torn open. There was a cut along his jawline that would scar if not treated properly. I didn't ask what had happened. I already knew. Somehow, through the city's grapevine and my own horror, I understood. 23 people dead, 4 of them Volkov's direct lieutenants. Volkov himself gone to ground, his empire in chaos. "It's finished," Luca said, and the relief in his voice suggested it wasn't finished at all. Just redirected, postponed, transformed into something worse. I helped him clean the wound on his face. I brought him ice for his hand. I prepared the bed so he could lie down carefully, without jarring his injured shoulder. "I killed them because they threatened you," he said in the darkness. "And I want you to understand something very clearly. I would kill everyone in this city if it meant keeping you safe. I would burn it all down. I would become worse than I already am, and I am very bad indeed." "I know," I said. "Do you? Do you understand what it means to be loved by someone like me? It means that your safety is worth more than whole families. It means that revenge for an insult directed at you is not just justified, but necessary. It means that you matter more than the empire I've spent my life building. You don't have to," I started. "I do. That's the point. I have to. I will. Indefinitely." He turned to face me, and even in the darkness, I could see the intensity of his eyes. "The Volkovs will regather," he said. "The commission will get involved. There will be politics, negotiations, more violence. This isn't over. But Volkov has been diminished enough that taking you is no longer worth the cost. You're mine now, completely and irrevocably. What if I want..." "You want this," he said with absolute certainty. "I know you do. You wanted it the moment you spoke that one forbidden word and changed everything. You wanted it when you sat across from me and chose trust instead of fear. You wanted it last night when you let me inside you. And you want it now, even covered in the knowledge of what I did to keep you." I didn't deny it. I couldn't. It was the truth. He kissed me slowly, carefully, mindful of his injuries. His hand found mine in the darkness and held it so tightly it almost hurt. "I'm sorry," he whispered against my lips. "For what?" "For making you complicit in this. For making you an accessory to death. For being incapable of loving you in a clean way." "I don't want a clean way," I said. "I want this. I want you." He held me through the night, and in the morning, when he got up to take a shower, I found his phone on the nightstand. Against every instinct, against everything I should have known better, I looked. Text messages from Dominic. Crime scene photos, body counts. A message from someone I didn't know. "Volkov is moving operations out of the city." Message received. I put the phone back. And I made the choice that morning to become the woman I would need to be to live in this world. Not innocent, not naive, not someone who could pretend she didn't know. Someone who chose to love him anyway. January became February. The apartment was restored to its serene normalcy, except nothing was normal anymore. Federal investigators came to the restaurant Rossini's, where I'd first heard the dangerous words. They had questions about Luca that he answered calmly, with lawyers present, with the kind of composure that suggested he'd done this many times before. I wasn't questioned. I was protected, which meant my connection to him was public now in a way that previous ambiguity had avoided. I was the waitress who'd become the Mafia boss's girlfriend. The women's magazines would have called it a fairy tale if the foundation hadn't been violence and coercion and a calculated choice to stay. "They're going to use you against me," Dominic warned one evening when he came to the apartment. He looked at me directly, and I appreciated the honesty. "They'll offer you immunity. They'll offer you protection. They'll tell you that what he did was excessive, that the violence was unjustified. What will you do if I leave?" I asked him. "Find you, bring you back, or make sure you don't testify." It was said almost gently, almost like an apology. "I'm not leaving," I said. "People change their minds. I'm not people. I'm someone who listened to him, admit what he is, and chose to stay. That choice holds." Dominic left, and when Luca came home that evening, I told him what had happened. He was quiet for a long time. "You should have left," he said finally. "When Dominic told you what would happen, you should have understood it as permission, a way out." "I don't want a way out." "Why?" I moved closer to him. We were standing in the apartment where he'd held me, loved me, confessed himself to me, in the only way he knew how. "Because I love you," I said, and it was the first time I'd said it directly. Not despite what you are, but including it, understanding it, accepting it as the cost of being with you. He pulled me against him, and his breathing was ragged, like I'd physically hurt him. "I can't protect you from the justice system," he said. "I can make it harder, but I can't make it disappear. If they decide to prosecute, to use you, I can't stop them. Then we'll deal with it together." That's not how this works. Maybe not in your world, but in ours, and we have one now, don't we? A world that's just you and me. Maybe in our world, that's exactly how it works. In March, the federal case fell apart, not because of anything Luca did directly, but Volkov, from his diminished position in the shadows, made a deal. He would testify against Luca in exchange for witness protection and relocation. He wanted his revenge. The case was solid. The prosecutors were confident. Luca's lawyer told him to prepare for trial. Instead, 3 days before the grand jury was supposed to hear Volkov's testimony, Volkov disappeared. The feds investigated. The case collapsed without its star witness. Charges were eventually dropped due to insufficient evidence. Luca came home that night and said nothing about it. We had dinner. We made love. We lay in the darkness like we always did. "Thank you," I said quietly. "For what?" "For making sure the case against you fell apart." He was quiet for a long time. "I didn't do anything. It was a lie, and we both knew it." "I would have stayed," I said, "even if you'd gone to prison. I want you to know that. I know. That's why I couldn't let it happen. He pulled me closer. The only thing worse than being in prison would be leaving you on the outside. And I can't do that. I won't. Spring came. The cherry blossoms bloomed in Central Park. The city transformed into something hopeful and dangerous. Luca took me to a restaurant. Not Rossini's, but something smaller, more intimate. A place that was clearly neutral territory, protected by respect rather than fear. He ordered the wine he liked, the pasta his mother had taught him to make. And as we ate, he took my hand. I want to marry you, he said simply. You're serious? Completely. Not because it's romantic or because you deserve it or because any normal person would think this is reasonable, but because I want it, because I need it, because I need to make this official in a way that goes beyond love into something deeper. And if I say no, he smiled, then I'll convince you. I'm very good at convincing people to do what I want. I thought about the waitress who'd spoken a forbidden word, about the woman who'd let herself be locked in an apartment, about the girl who'd chosen to stay even when escape was possible. I'll marry you, I said. His relief was visible, real. Good. I want a wedding in 6 months. Small. Only family and my closest associates. Somewhere beautiful. Somewhere that belongs to me. What about my family? If they don't object to me being a criminal, they can attend. If they do, you'll have to choose. I knew what he was really asking. Whether I was willing to sacrifice everything for him, whether I was truly committed, or whether my love had limits. They won't object, I said. Because I'm going to tell them this is what I want. This is what I chose. The wedding was in September, exactly 6 months after Luca proposed. It took place at Villa Carmine, a sprawling estate in Westchester that Luca had inherited from his grandmother. The grounds were beautiful in the way expensive things are beautiful. Marble statuary, manicured gardens, a chapel that had been in his family for 3 generations. My parents had flown in from Vermont. My brother brought a date. They were nervous, unsure, but they came. And they saw me standing in a white dress. Luca had insisted on white despite everything, and they made their peace with the choice I'd made. The guest list was small. Dominic as best man, a handful of Luca's closest associates, my family and a few friends, though I was careful about which friends, the ones who could be trusted not to judge, or to judge silently. Luca wore a charcoal suit. When he saw me coming down the aisle of the chapel, his expression broke open, not smiling, but something more honest than a smile. Raw, vulnerable, his. You look beautiful, he said when I reached him, loud enough for everyone to hear. You're beautiful, I replied, and his hand tightened on mine. The ceremony was short. Traditional Italian vows spoken in English so my family could understand. When it came time for rings, I noticed his hand trembling slightly as he slid the band onto my finger. I do, he said when asked. And there was something absolute in those 2 words. Not a legal declaration. A vow to protect, to possess, to never let go. When he kissed me, it felt like a sealing not of a marriage, but of a fate. That night, in the bridal suite of the hotel where we were staying, Luca held me and said something he'd never said before. I need you to know that this isn't a happy ending, he said. This is a beautiful, dangerous thing that I've built. But it's not happy. It's not safe. It's not the life you were supposed to have. I know, I said. The violence won't stop. The danger won't disappear. There are rivals who are waiting for a moment of weakness, and a wedding is a moment of weakness. There are political enemies who want to use you against me. There are feds who would like nothing more than to find a way to force you to testify against me. Your life is potentially in danger every single day now. I know all of this, I said quietly, and you chose it anyway. I chose you. The rest is just circumstance. He pulled back enough to look at me in the dim light of the room. Do you still think of it as a cage? The apartment, the rules, the surveillance? I thought about the key he'd given me, about the days when I could have left and didn't, about the woman I'd become through this process. No, I think of it as home. The first threat came 3 weeks after the wedding. A car pulled up alongside us as we were leaving a restaurant. Windows down, the barrel of a gun visible. Luca shoved me down, covered my body with his, and the world exploded into gunfire. The return fire was immediate and overwhelming. The rival family's car was riddled with bullets, swerved, crashed into a fire hydrant. Luca dragged me from the street, covered in the water and the chaos, and pulled me toward a car that materialized like it had always been waiting. We drove in silence for 10 minutes before I realized I was screaming. "Shh," he said, his hand finding mine in the back seat. "It's over. We're safe." "How is this safe?" I demanded. "How is this?" "Because they missed. Because we survived. Because I have contingencies for contingencies. Because I keep you alive, even when the world tries very hard to make that impossible." I realized, then, what I'd married. Not just a man, a force of nature. A will that bent the world to his design through sheer determination and a level of ruthlessness that was almost beautiful in its purity. Winter came again. A year since I'd first spoken the forbidden word. A year since he'd cleared the room and decided to keep me. The apartment felt different now. Less like a cage, less like a stage. More like a home that existed in the margins of legitimate society, protected by violence and power and the absolute certainty that Luca would burn the world rather than let it threaten me. My parents came for Thanksgiving. They'd stopped asking questions about the nature of Luca's business. They'd accepted me as the wife of a man whose world they would never fully understand. "He loves you," my mother said to me in the kitchen while Luca was in the other room. "Anyone can see that." "He does," I agreed. "Is it enough? Is his love enough to make up for everything else?" I thought about the fear and the danger, about the blood on his hands, about the people who died because someone had threatened me, about the choice I'd made repeatedly, to stay. "It's not about enough," I said. "It's about inevitability. This is what I chose, and I'd choose it again." On New Year's Eve, we stood on the balcony again, like we did every year. "I have news," Luca said. "The commission has shifted. Volkov has been completely eliminated, removed from the city entirely. There's a power vacuum, and I'm being approached to fill part of it. The other families want stability. They want me as a check against the newer, more brutal families moving in." "Is that good or bad?" I asked. "It's both. More power means more responsibility. More enemies means more danger. For you specifically, it means you'll have an even bigger target on your back." I leaned against him, and his arm came around my waist. "So what?" I said. "I'm used to targets." He laughed, a real sound, rare and beautiful. "You're remarkable, Sophie. Do you know that? Most people would be terrified." "I am terrified," I said. "All the time, but I'm here anyway." "Why?" I turned to face him. In the reflection of the city lights, I could see us both, him in his expensive suit, me in the dress he'd bought, the two of us framed by the skyline of a city that belonged to him in ways he'd never fully articulated. "Because you're worth it," I said. "Because loving you feels like the most honest thing I've ever done. Because being your wife feels like coming home even though home is chaotic and dangerous and impossible." He kissed me as the city exploded below us in celebration of a new year. His hand came up to cup my face, and his mouth moved against mine with the same quiet certainty it always had. When he pulled back, he said something in Italian, then translated it for me. "For all my days, you are my dangerous heart." "Then I'm in the right place," I said. But there was one thing he hadn't told me yet. I found out 3 weeks later, when Dominic came to the apartment with documents. Papers that Luca signed without explanation. Documents that Dominic wouldn't let me see. "What is it?" I asked when they'd finished. Luca looked at me, and there was something in his expression I couldn't read. "Insurance," he said finally. "Against the impossible. If something happens to me, you have power, you have money, you have options. You have a way out that doesn't involve anyone else making decisions about your future." "Something like what?" "A bullet, a betrayal, a war that I can't win. There are 1,000 ways this ends badly." I felt cold, but I don't want options. I want you. "I know. But I need you to have them, because I can't predict the future. And I need to know that if the worst happens, you don't disappear into the machinery of the criminal underworld. You get to choose what comes next." "I choose this," I said fiercely. "I choose you. I choose right now, this moment, this life. I know you do. But someday, The choice might be between me and your survival. And I need you to choose survival. I need that, Sophie. Please. I understood, then, what he was really saying. That he loved me enough to give me an escape route he was terrified I'd use. That his greatest fear wasn't death or imprisonment, but that I'd become trapped in the wake of his violence. I won't use it, I said. I know. But you can. That's what matters. The story doesn't end there. Though this is where it ends in the way that endings work for people like us. Because there are always consequences waiting. There are always enemies who haven't been eliminated, whose time will come. There are always alliances that shift, wars that begin without warning, violence that erupts in the margins of our carefully constructed world. But standing in the apartment in February, with the snow falling on Central Park and Luca's hand in mine, I understood something fundamental. I wasn't trapped anymore. I was exactly where I wanted to be, with the man I'd chosen, in the life I'd built brick by brick, out of danger and desire, and the absolute certainty that this him, us, the impossibility of it all was worth any price. He turned to face me, pulled me close, and kissed me like he was trying to apologize for everything that was coming, everything he couldn't prevent, everything that would inevitably threaten us again. I'm not going anywhere, I said into the space between us. You say that now, he replied. I'll say it every day for the rest of my life. And I meant it. Even knowing what I knew. Even understanding the danger. Even accepting the beautiful, terrible cost of loving a man who'd decided I was worth more than the empire he'd spent his life building. Outside, the city continued. People lived and died and made choices they believed would save them. But here, in this apartment suspended above it all, I'd made my choice, and there was nothing in the world that could undo it.